Welcome back to the Texas Appellate Law Podcast. I'm Todd Smith.
And I'm Jody Sanders.
Our guest today is Joe Stevens. Joe is out in Lubbock working for the Caprock Public Defender's Office. He's also a professor at Texas Tech Law School and consults for Steno. And we're going to talk about all of those things in visiting with Joe today, including some other topics that we like to cover and we've covered fairly often lately, namely AI. So, Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be with you both.
Well, I've covered sort of generally where you are right now. Why don't we go back a little bit and tell us about your background, kind of what led you into the law?
Yeah, it's interesting. No lawyers in my family. I don't have an accent, but I'm Australian by birth and grew up in D.C. through high school and then sort of have shuffled around to different places since then. I moved to Austin in 2004. And I sort of moved there to race triathlons, believe it or not. Nothing connected to the law whatsoever. And I was actually doing a lot of bike riding out in a district just south of Austin. And through that, believe it or not, that's what led me to work for a state rep from that district. So I found my way into the capital inside Texas for a few sessions, law school, and then I left for a while too. I decided that actually I didn't want to do civil work. And so I moved to New York for a moment. And it was about 2018 when I actually decided to come back, and I spent a year doing post-conviction and appellate work in Baltimore. And then I decided I wanted to be the guy in a courtroom. So I picked the smallest town in Texas that had a public defender office, and that took me to Beeville, Texas for a couple of years. Now I'm teaching at law school at Tech, run the clinic there, run the public defender office there. And right before that, I built the Concho Valley Public Defender Office. So that was which was still the largest rural public defender office in Texas. It's been a journey, a windy path for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, we've spoken often about how there are different paths to the law and to practice. And even once you're in, the law is broad enough that if you're not happy what you're doing or you want to try something else, you can certainly do it because there's so many different areas to cover. Tell me about the Caprock PDO specifically and in the clinic that you're running. Is that clinic focused on just general criminal defense, or has it got a more narrow focus?
Yeah, that's it. All public defender offices in Texas are funded predominantly through the Texas Indigent Defense Commission, and Caprock Public Defender Office is no different. So that came to be, I think, in 2011, before my time. I obviously didn't create it. But it's funded through the TIDC, and it obviously is housed within the law school there. So just like any other public defender office, we get appointed cases. And in Caprock, the cases that we get come from a number of counties outside Lubbock. So nothing in Lubbock County, but just rural courthouses around. So we take those cases, I'm the sole sort of employee of that office. And then when the school year is in session, I basically, use those cases to teach and do so in a very supervised way, right? So they have meaningful assignments, client engagement. The preparation that these students actually do is just phenomenal, and the results are incredible. So proud of the work that they do, especially in these really, 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 these communities that need this kind of presence in their courthouses.
Mm-hmm. So where is the PDO based out of if it's not drawing cases from Lubbock County specifically?
Yeah, so I'm obviously inside the law school, but where we'll take cases from pretty much every surrounding county. There's another criminal clinic inside the law school that handles Lubbock County indigent cases. So I'm in Terry County or Yoakum County or Briscoe County. I mean, just tiny, tiny, tiny counties. Some that have pretty irregular dockets. Some meet monthly. But, these are communities that are feeling a lot of what rural communities in Texas are feeling, which is that lawyers just aren't there. So the rights of the indigent, especially the indigent accused out there, it makes it hard, right? It's a real challenge. So it solves a number of needs at once, I think, in kind of a wonderful way. The students learn, representation provided to these defendants is incredible, I think, as a result. And then from sort of an operational perspective, the counties are happy because their dockets aren't stagnant.
Well, and I neglected to tease out that I was aware from before we started recording that Caprock is the only public defender's office based inside a law school. So that tells me where it's based. Sorry to be redundant in the questioning there a little bit, but I just thought it was interesting that you're getting the casework and the caseload coming into Caprock PD is from the, I would say, outlying counties and not from Lubbock County specifically. But sounds like you've got a great relationship with Tech Law School, and they're gracious enough to provide you space. And I guess this is part of the trade-off for you teaching at the law school as well.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful relationship. And before this, as I said, I was building the Concho Valley office and hired a number of people right out of the law school at Tech. And I went to UT myself, and I've just been so impressed with the caliber of like practitioner that has come out of these clinics at Tech. Sort of battle tested and they're ready. I mean, you learn so much. The best classroom in a way in the world is for these students who want to do criminal work is the rural courthouses of Texas. In a way, I sort of like the idea. I mean, they step out of either criminal law class and then we get in the car, we drive 2 hours to another county, and then we sort of say, okay, this is the way it's taught. Now this is the way it's actually going to go. How do you prepare for those moments? And the skill set is just incredible when they have to sort of think on their feet and wrap their head around the way things actually play out in these courthouses.
So are they getting like third-year bar cards, or how is that working for them going?
Exactly right. Yeah. And so I supervise them. There's a couple of other professors at the law school as well who supervise them. But yeah, they're operating under a bar card.
Well, what a great experience for them, while still in law school, to be able to actually stand up and introduce themselves, or maybe you're introducing them to the judge and speak on behalf of a client. I mean, that's a tremendous experience that relatively few law students get.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll touch on this maybe sort of tangentially when we talk more about AI. I think one of the things that's powerful about it too is, there's nothing like doing it to actually teach you how to get it done.
Absolutely.
I think in a world now where, some of the students spent time learning on Zoom because of the pandemic, or now we're seeing AI affect different skill sets that young practitioners have. The ability to get on your feet and actually make the announcement or make the argument is, I mean, it's unparalleled. You just have to learn how to do it. And that's the best experience in the world.
And also just being able to talk directly to a client. That's not an experience that a lot of attorneys get their first few years out of law school, but being the person kind of there to explain it and break it down and talk through strategy, that's huge.
100% right. I mean, it's one thing to do the research. It's one thing to sort of prep the motion. It's another thing to actually sort of have a difficult conversation with a client or, sort of contested, hearing with a prosecutor. Like the actual skill set itself is only polishable, I think, by the doing of it. So I totally agree with that.
Well, you take it away from just being theory and classroom learning, and even mock trial. You've got a good fact problem, and you've got somebody who's your judge. But I just can't imagine that there's any better experience for a law student than actually getting into the courtroom with a real client and a real judge, and being able to speak and offer, pleadings such as they are in criminal cases. I think that's just a tremendous opportunity for those students.
Yeah. It's the moments that matter the most to me are the ones where someone will walk into my office and say, for example, he's been sitting there 91 days and the case hasn't been indicted. What do I do? And then I can kind of go back to them and say, well, what do you do? Right? You know the law. Now this is what's playing out in this county. How do you actually go about getting this person out of jail? Now, but let's do that. And it's those moments, those real teaching moments that are just so powerful because it's it takes exactly, I mean, it's the transition from theory to practice. Again, just the thinking through, watching their minds develop over the course of an academic year is just incredible.
How many students do you have on average in the clinic?
Well, the most we can take is 8. And in this upcoming year, I've got 6. And, the growth is just tremendous. I don't know if either of you did clinic work in law school. I did not. But watching the growth from the early conversations that we have, the questions that they have, to then the arguments that they're making by the end of the calendar year is just staggering.
My clinical experience was a capital punishment clinic, and it wasn't nearly as hands-on because by definition, you're dealing with a record and you're writing, and the relationship with the client was not one that we could maintain because they were clearly incarcerated and, on death row. And so it was a valuable experience, no doubt, because it taught me more about that subject than I ever wanted to learn. But I'm just amazed by that level of hands-on experience that you're able to offer your students. And capping it at 8 is great, but having a group of 6, that's even better, it would seem, because you got a lot of chance to really influence how those students transition between being law students and into practice.
That's it. The intimacy matters, right? Like having that time to work on cases meaningfully and answer questions is just, it's a game changer. Absolutely right.
Well, let's cover your work at Steno, because that was the first contact that we had, was from someone at Steno basically reaching out to us to say, hey, we've got this guy, Joe Stevens, that we think might be good to have on your show. So they were definitely your cheerleaders. You're doing consulting work with them. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. They're a fascinating company, and when I was living in New York, I worked with a couple of their Steno's founders on a different project, and I sort of had just stayed in touch with them over the years. At its core, it's a court reporting agency, right? So they do exactly what that sounds like, and the technology around that they've built is really, really, really thoughtful. The thing that was most interesting to me was the AI product that they've developed, which is designed to interrogate legal transcripts and do so in a really thorough, thoughtful, reliable way, right? Built by lawyers, with lawyers in mind, understanding that we have sort of ethical obligations, confidentiality obligations, and then now, as we're seeing, like verifying the output of the AI itself matters tremendously too. So I thought that they went about it really thoughtfully, and then that's exactly what I do for them is sort of be the lawyer who can actually talk about practical use cases of it and advise people how to use it and sort of show how transformative it truly is.
So you said that it allows lawyers to interrogate legal transcripts. So somewhere they've got, I guess, this proprietary software that the transcript that they've generated is uploaded into, and then there's literally, you're able to communicate with an agent, a bot, that can help get at information that's in the transcript. Is that basically the function?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, so the flow really runs from you book the job, you book a deposition through Steno, or you're in trial. Then automatically, once that is transcribed, it is delivered to your dashboard. From that dashboard, you can access the AI. And this is obviously an appellate law podcast. The use case there is just tremendous, right? I mean, and quite easy to wrap your head around. Just the volume of record and the transcripts that live in the record. Now, what I used to be doing in Baltimore, which was just sort of getting up to speed on what took place and what are the legal issues at play. Now you can sort of obviously use AI to do that in real time across single or multiple transcripts. So you can really kind of cut out a lot of the busy work and go right into, I mean, truly interrogating transcripts or cross-examining them in a very, very, very thoughtful and thorough way. And the technology is, so the AI exists, and then we've really, really honed it to so it knows what transcripts really are and what the flow of transcripts are and how important citations are and how to make sure that you cross-reference what it's telling you with what actually lives in the transcripts. It has been thoughtfully rolled out. And I mean, I had a student actually who was assisting on an appeal just last semester. And we used it on that. And again, the time saving is just immense.
Well, the first question a lot of people ask when they hear about a new AI legal product, and this doesn't sound like it's new, what's used to train it? Are you, do you advise on that sort of back end stuff or on the technical side? Or you kind of talked about it being a practical consulting role, but what's the model, if you know, that AI is built on, and what does it consult? Does it fall back on like a OpenAI type LLM, or what's it using?
Yeah, exactly. So we use Claude, Anthropic. So right now, they just pushed out a few weeks ago 4.0, the Opus and Sonnet. We obviously test these models and ruthlessly sort of behind the scenes. So we rely on Claude's AI and then obviously have really beefed up the security and the compliance. So it's HIPAA compliant, it's SOC 2 compliant. There's no data retention, right? So if you start interrogating transcripts, the information that you're putting into Transcript Genius is what the product is called. It's not being retained in any way, shape, or form by Transcript Genius or by Claude as part of sort of our business agreement. And obviously that's critical to the ethical use of AI by practitioners too. So it's not getting smarter based off the information you're giving it. And then once the interrogation sort of is done, it's done. So the information that you get from it, you can export and take to another document. Yeah, it's not going to be sort of getting smarter based on client information.
Yeah, really interesting. And I'm sure very useful for trial lawyers. And as you point out, for appellate lawyers too, because we so often will be reading trial transcripts before there's ever an appeal. And, I'm using a couple of different products that I think have definitely made some strides on, sort of bridging the gap between human capacity and the robots. But those are always the questions that people want to know. Is it being used to train my data? Excuse me, is my data, strike that. Is my data being used to train the platform? But y'all are tied into a very reputable LLM there. So it sounds like that's all taken care of and people can have peace of mind with what's happening with the transcript data.
Yeah, in Texas especially, right? The most recent sort of opinion by this state bar about ethical use of AI, and you see this around the country too, but I always just like basically sort of surface two things. One is the security that you just discussed, and then the second is this sort of more manual security of using AI, which is verifying what it's telling you. And Transcript Genius does both of those things brilliantly. So it checks the box, right? So you can actually go about using it to enhance your practice. And I just think it's a wonderful product. I mean, it's a niche AI tool that has demonstrable benefits. And as you said at the jump too, from an access to justice point of view, it's just exceptional what it can
All right. Oh, go ahead, Jody.
Well, I was going to say, that's one thing I kind of wanted to talk to you about more generally, and not just with your Steno product, but how do you use AI in public defense? Because it seems like it would be a huge, resource multiplier in a place where resources are already very slim.
Yeah. I mean, Jody, that's it, right? Like the world of public defense historically is one where you have limited resources, more cases than you probably should, and not enough time ever. And now we have the technology that allows every single one of those things to sort of not be as pronounced, I suppose. So everything from, AI, I mean, the ability for AI to actually sort of analyze discovery, to pay attention to different parts of videos. You get so much digital discovery now, so much video discovery, understanding if you get, 3-hour dash cam that is really just kind of vacant. There's nothing really going on. Maybe no one even says anything. Now you can sort of have AI let you know the inflection points of these videos, let you sort of at least begin to tailor how you can best allocate your time to the things that matter on each case. From an appellate point of view, obviously the time saving is tremendous. It's just, you simply don't have to I don't sit with the record as long as I used to. And the time that I am spending with the record, I'm spending in a way that is less about sort of information extraction and more about the creative application of the information now that I've gleaned by using AIs. I think which is probably the case with every AI discussion, we're scratching the surface. I'm really interested to see what it's going to do to sort of like, motions practice and people out of court now, people who are now coming into meetings, client meetings. I want to say somewhat more prepared, but they can actually, engage with AI outside of their case to at least ask some different questions than they were in the past. So it really is a disruptor, and I'm going to be fascinated to see where it actually takes the world of public defense.
Well, we've had a lot of observations made on our show about anticipating where it's going to take the world of law practice generally. But I'm with Jody. I mean, and you've pointed out, I mean, the scale, the efficiency scale to be gained doing what you do from that kind of a service is tremendous. I wanted to ask the other question that I'm sure Steno gets asked a lot, which is, do you have any issues with hallucinations? It's not really a truly closed system because it's using Claude and Anthropic, but has that been an issue, or are there some safeguards within the Steno system? I forgot the branding that you all have given it, and you mentioned it a minute ago, if you want to repeat it. But what about that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, AI is going to hallucinate, right? There's no AI out there that is not going to be prone in some form or fashion to hallucinate. So that's always the baseline. The Transcript Genius is the product that Steno has built. And one of the ways that we sort of have warded that off, or paying attention to the risk of hallucination, is by making sure that every single data point that it gives you is also linked, hyperlinked to the part of the document, part of the transcript where it's getting the information from. So it is true that if you use ChatGPT to do case law research, put it in a filing, and then, it has hallucinated and you get called on that, that is just an attorney sort of misusing AI, right? That's not necessarily an AI issue. That should become a verification on the attorney's side issue. So the ability to actually verify its output is critical to the use of Transcript Genius, and we've just made that super easy. The other thing that's true is, I think, as AI keeps sort of developing, like we're seeing this in the Opus model, for example, the 4.0 Opus, it's gotten better at acknowledging when it needs more information and needs more context, rather than just jumping in and providing misinformation. That's true as well. We've seen that sort of change. And then I think the last piece is, people really need to know, and we're seeing state bars talk about this too, people need to know what the tool that they're like what its purpose is. If you're using ChatGPT to do case law research, then you're not using the right product for the right purpose. Even internally with Westlaw or Lexis, the AI, you still need to be checking and making sure that what it's telling you is correct. So this is a niche tool designed to interrogate transcripts. And I think if people really understand how that slots in, you're not going to be looking to it to give you any sort of meaningful case law interpretation or analysis.
Well, you're clearly very knowledgeable about what's going on in AI, and we want to talk about that some more. The going from zero to knowledgeable is not a real easy thing to do because there's such a flood of information. It's, you're literally drinking out of the proverbial fire hose when it comes to AI, especially now because it's changing so frequently. How did you make the transition or develop that skill going from, being an everyday practicing lawyer like me and Jody to now law professor and clinical professor?
Yeah. So I spent about 3 years in San Angelo, Texas, building the Concho Valley Public Defender Office with a number of incredible people who are still there and doing tremendous work. That covered 12 counties. So the job of a chief public defender in this state is one of many hats, right? You're sort of politics. You're accountable to an oversight board. You have to pay attention to obviously your counties. And then I also had a caseload. So there's a lot of things, and you're teaching and hiring and you're recruiting, all of these things that are going on at once, many hats. So for me, the opportunity to transition from there into a clinical professor role allowed me to really focus on the things about public defense that I love, which is attorney development, working on cases thoughtfully, meaningfully, thoroughly, and then teaching others to do the same. So I loved that. AI slots in so perfectly to that because if you deploy it correctly or you deploy it at all, you just can sort of make the time in your day more beneficial. And so I guess that's my answer to your question. But I think more abstractly, I would say to people who are trying to figure out how to insert it or how to become sort of tech conversational with it, I just kind of advise people, I'm like, what is the one area of your practice? What is the one area that is causing you sort of, I don't know, that has the most busy work or seems to have the most friction or seem to be the most repetitive? There is 100% right now, almost certainly an AI tool that can jump in to deal with that specific issue, whether it's an automation of some sort, or whether it is, in this case, like what we talked about, a transcript analysis tool. I just need to summarize this and provide information to an insurance carrier. I need to prep my witness for a cross-examine, whatever it might be. What is the one area of your practice that actually is the biggest time suck? And that's a great starting point to insert AI into it.
Yeah, I mean, you can try to teach yourself about it just as a general matter. And that's where the level of information, the depth of information just can be overwhelming. But that's what you just described, Joe, kind of sounds like the way that lawyers have solved problems forever, which is look at the problem that's right in front of you and find a solution.
Yeah.
And now it's just a matter of, okay, is that solution just regular, ordinary legal tech, or is it something AI related? And nowadays the market is such that there's way more tools out there focusing on specific issues that can address that narrow problem. And so it's kind of like when we talk about the need for additional rules and regulations on AI, it's like, well, we've already got these ethical rules that have been in place for generations of lawyers. Do we really need more? You stay within the guardrails that are there, focus on your problem, and with a little effort, you can learn about it, right?
Yeah, I totally
How
agree.
to solve it.
That's exactly it. I mean, the curiosity around it, I think there's so many cliches already that have evolved, right? Like people would say probably a year ago that maybe it was malpractice, to use it. Now, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to be the opposite now. Like if you're not using it, you might be losing business. You almost certainly are losing business to someone who is. Does it need to replace your entire workflow or upend it? Absolutely not. But it should be a thoughtful part of the way you sort of analyze and break down how you're practicing. To your point about, do we need more rules? I think it's one of the fascinating conundrums around AI is because of the rapid pace of innovation and how quickly it sort of iterates. I don't even know how to thoughtfully regulate it. I mean, how do you regulate something that is moving so fast? And then the regulatory bodies traditionally, obviously, move at a fraction of that pace. And also, how do you do so in a way that doesn't stifle innovation, right? This is the conundrum. And we're in the middle of this answer. So it's a curious flow right now.
Well, I think you've given me a segue now to talk about the statute that was just passed and signed into law here in Texas, the Texas Responsible Artificial Intelligence Governance Act, that's a mouthful. Known as TRAGA for short. When we were first communicating with you about coming on the show, there was some question about what that would wind up looking like. Now we know because it's been signed and it'll be on the books and is effective January 1, I believe. So there's a lot of detail that we could dive into on that statute, but what would you say, based on your knowledge of it, or the main points that lawyers generally need to know about it?
Yeah. So, the setup to this is states are trying to figure out exactly what we just discussed. How do you thoughtfully regulate this, ideally without stifling innovation? Texas tends to be a business-friendly state, and I think that the end product of this regulation too reflects that. Other states have more comprehensive regulatory frameworks around AI. Texas, throughout the course of this legislative session, at least, this bill, as is very true with a lot of bills, changed form tremendously over the course of the session. And it just became sort of legislation by scalpel, not sledgehammer. I mean, they just really selected a couple of things that, some new prohibitions, making some certain disclosure requirements, things like that. Where I think lawyers actually should be paying attention is what the state bar has really pushed out, and that was in February, about ethical use of AI. And I think that the focus there really needs to be on probably a few things. One of them is the product that you're using secure? Can you verify how secure is it? Is it HIPAA compliant? Again, what are the levels of security? It should be very transparently broadcast. The second thing is the AI itself allowing you to verify what it's telling you? We've talked about that already. Another thing I think that matters is disclosure. I mean, how are lawyers disclosing their use of AI to clients? And is that something that is part of the sort of initial engagement? It's clear that you obviously can't bill for time that you're saving by using AI, but that's something that state bars feel a need to sort of reiterate as well, Texas included. And then I think lastly, just staying up to speed. There is now an ethical component to this where you have to be aware of what product you're using, what the purpose is. You don't have to sit in a product room and sort of go into the tech minutia, but you do have to know that, if what you're using certain products for. And so those things, I think, are the real areas of focus for practitioners. And I think that the state bar is going to give more guidance as things change. The legislature, given how infrequently it meets in Texas, I mean, they're not coming back to do anything about AI in the special session, which is not surprising at all. They won't be back for another 2 years, which is probably a good thing, but who knows what the AI landscape will look like and how it will change between now and then.
Based on my quick review of that statute, it really seems like it's geared at the developers, the folks who are creating the systems, and potential, malintentioned use of AI systems. So I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but it appears to me that most lawyers, that's not a statute that's really going to cross their desk, fulfilling whatever the state bar says their ethical obligations are, which is, maybe somewhat in flux, but follow the base principles and you're probably okay, right? Is there anything about that statute? I mean, we're only the third state in the union to adopt an AI regulatory statute. Is there anything about it that most lawyers day in and day out are going to need to be thinking about? Or is it, as you say, it's one of those things that maybe gets fleshed out probably the next session based on what happens between now and then?
Yeah, I think your read on it is exactly right. I mean, this is not the thing that is going to guide most practitioners. I do think it is the sort of edicts from the state bar, the guidelines that come from the state bar. This one, I think you said it very well. And I don't really know, even in 2 years, how it'll be regulated. Maybe, they seem to be regulating the most egregious misuses of AI. And so surely going to keep changing and transforming over the next couple of years. But day to day, I think you're exactly right. To me, the big focus ethically and from a practitioner perspective is what the state bar is sort of advising on that front. But I mean, again, some of this stuff is just AI adapted from current practices. I mean, you can't, like billing, it shouldn't be a surprise that you can't bill for time that you save by using AI. I mean, you should know where you're getting your information from and what you're putting in a filing. Like whether you're getting it from AI or from a book, it doesn't matter. But it is now adapted into the use of AI. So that is going to be, I think, where the guidelines are, most meaningful guidelines are coming from.
I also see, just to touch on that statute a bit more, and we'll drop a link in the show notes to somewhere where the practitioners can find the statute. Some features I noticed of it are there's no private right of action for any violations. It's only the AG's office that can enforce it. Some pretty stiff penalties that are built in there, like to the tune of, $40,000 a day, I think, for certain violations. But I guess the takeaway here is, and maybe this is part of that sort of cobbling together process that happens in our legislature, is, it sounds like the legislature intended to do something. And this was sort of the the test balloon as far as what to do, especially with us being only the third state to do anything. And so, but can you imagine, Joe, what AI is going to look like the next time the legislature comes back?
No, I mean, right. That's the fascinating thing. And I think you're exactly right. I think it's such a hot button issue. I mean, a number of other bills were filed that didn't pass or did pass that sort of tangentially deal with AI. But I think you're right. I think it's because it's so loudly an entrant to this conversation, and it's affecting so many areas of our world that this is the toe in the water that who knows how it's going to change with time.
Mm-hmm.
And Jody will appreciate my little joke here, but so private right of action, Texas lawyers, that means this is not contributing to the full Employment Act. Texas appellate lawyers, we're afraid unless it's someone representing the developers and companies in the industry, which is just fine because we typically have, after a new session ends, we typically have a lot of other things to do to flesh out what the legislature meant to do or did.
No
in
question.
The last session.
Yeah, it's I mean, I worked 2 inside the House for 2 different sort of committee chairmen, and then I worked 1 on the outside after law school. It's just this, I mean, when sine die hits, right, it's this big sort of exhale and this, okay, now what? And then every single conference, every practice area seems to have some sort of seminar that's like, okay, what does this mean for us now? And that's always interesting or scary.
Well, let's talk more about just general ethical issues and maybe about AI in daily practice. And specifically, I want to talk to you about how you think AI is affecting legal education because of your unique role in the system as both a practitioner and an educator. Maybe we'll start there and come back to other topics as we have time. But I mean, how are you incorporating, let me ask it this way and we can branch out from there. How are you incorporating AI discussions into the curriculum of the clinic that you're teaching?
Yeah, Todd, this is maybe one of my favorite sort of things to talk about because it's such a collision of worlds, right? First of all, it needs to be taught. It needs to be discussed. I firmly believe that. It's here, and the question is how it is best and most productively and most ethically used. But law schools also are a collection of different minds and different sort of experience levels. And some people look at this as a replacement of a skill set that, we're saying goodbye to the development of skill sets that lawyers traditionally would have developed by not using AI. So it's interesting to hear those conversations. I'm most interested with my students to see how they naturally gravitate towards it. Like my question is not whether they use it. Obviously everyone is. My question is how they're using it and what they use it for. Because then I can sort of productively, I think, advise and push towards, okay, so if you're using it for this, then let's make sure that we pay attention to the things that we talked about earlier. You being on your feet in court. Okay, now you have all the information. You need to be the one to make the phone call to the prosecutor. And I want you to really, really, really think about every single contingency and be ready for that discussion. How are you going to talk, like strategy conversations? If you've got the information more quickly, now how can you actually spend your time to really be the master strategist on these cases? Like the thing that AI really can't replace. That's where this is. It's sort of nebulous, but you sit in a faculty meeting now and the topic of AI comes up and people hear about how AI is being used. And there's a lot of groaning, right? There's a lot of eye rolling. There's just sort of, I can't believe this is here and this is what people are using it for. And I can't believe that we have to tell them that they can't use it for this. So I guess the last sort of tag on that for me is I think people are very quick to say, there's a whole spectrum of AI, right? Like they're the people who are the real evangelists and then they're the people who are the tremendous skeptics. I just really think that, on that spectrum, you sort of have to, there has to be now some space for adoption of it. There has to be it's just so transformative that you need to understand its forces and the power. And then I think to slot it into your practice in a meaningful way can just yield such tremendous returns.
So when you have those conversations, I'll assume that sort of the baseline for most of your students is, ChatGPT or Claude or something like that. And that maybe they're using it however students use it these days, kind of like how lawyers are using it, I guess. Maybe a little more advanced than how most lawyers are using it. But are you actually coaching the students on, hey, here's something to think about? You could use, let's say it's the Steno product. Let's say it's Transcript Genius. Here's how you can use this product in working on your case to help you be more efficient. Are you taking that kind of active role with them?
Yeah. I mean, I had a student, as I said, he was working on an appeal this last semester. He had interned the summer before with an office and he had volunteered to help on an appeal. And I said, this is a product that is kick the tires on it. And then it all becomes about, okay, prompt engineering. Like, how do you maximize the output of the tool? This is where I think it gets really interestingly sort of psychological. Like, I do think that one of the things that AI is showing is it reflects back at you how good you are at, one, being curious, two, asking follow-up questions, and three, just asking questions in general. Like, and that can expose a real sort of human weakness. And I just think in a world where people don't seem to be as curious and don't seem to ask a lot or don't seem to listen sometimes, these are the skills that you still have to use to successfully like allow AI to augment your practice. So that use case was fantastic. I mean, he wrote an appeal that covered issues that initially, he was able to drill into much more quickly, much more thoughtfully, able to do case law research around that. You can use AI to sort of come up with research terms. There's so many ways that these products can coexist with each other meaningfully. And then it also caught issues that had been missed. If it was, my thought is to, in specific use cases, to let people invited into the room as a thought partner, as a sort of a creative advisor, as a trial partner or a hearing prep partner. And then you take what the information is, and then you can sort of decide how to strategically deploy it. So I think it's amazing. I personally have used it, and I don't know if this is, I sort of helped pro bono on a civil case against the city of Chicago. The team that was working lead on that case were incredible. And it was a civil right. It was a police brutality case. I used it to generate everything from creative trial themes to jury selection questions to opening statements to closing arguments to really putting a lot of documentation in there that allowed me to build an anticipated cross-examination of the plaintiff in this case. Everything about that, saved from an access to justice point of view and from an efficiency point of view, saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal sort of fees and costs that wound up in the pockets of the plaintiff in this case. And I just think that if you deploy it effectively, the results are just going to be incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. But your point earlier about you've got to have the experience to know what's effective and what strategically, what may work, what may not. And then even more importantly, what's accurate and what's not. That's where I think there's a gap there potentially that the law student who hangs their shingle right out of law school is going to have that tool available, but developing those other skills, the counseling skills, the analytical skills, we got to leave that in the hands of the legal educators.
Yeah,
in that
100%.
situation. So it seems that like the law schools, do have I think a tremendous responsibility to teach law students. I know, you talked about the groans and the eye rolls in faculty meetings. I sure hope that by now every law school has accepted that this is not going away. This is not going to pass, and that the law schools themselves really have an obligation to, I think, even affirmatively teach the law students about AI. Absolutely. So that they know what it does, what it doesn't do, and beyond what they actually just read in the news. So any different thoughts on that?
No, I think you're exactly right. And amidst all the groans and the grumbling too, there's, people have had a way of doing things for so long, and then you have something that sort of jumps in to disrupt that, and that can be frustrating or confusing. I mean, I remember having conversations with people when files went from paper to digital, right? And it's like, well, but I love paper file. So any sort of transformation of the practice is going to yield, I think, some sort of hesitance from a certain camp in general. But the absolute national trend is, I think, you're seeing law schools teach AI and bring that in, whether it's even like technology in the practice of law and AI is a piece of that. We're seeing that sort of fall in more and more and more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Joe, we've kind of reached the end of our time here, and we appreciate all this. This has been super interesting. But one thing we kind of do as our tradition to wrap up is end with either a tip or a war story. And you've given us a lot of great tips already. You may have more, or maybe you've got a war story you want to share.
Maybe I jumped the gun by talking about that civil case in Chicago. That was the first time that it was the perfect collision of worlds for me, right? It was, I've been practicing for a while. It was a civil case that had a tremendous amount of purpose to me as well. So there was a real story behind that affected someone who spent nearly 30 years in prison for a crime that he was then, has an innocence certificate now in his possession because he didn't do it. So then it was sort of taking that story of injustice running it through the legal system, trying to get some whatever just compensation is for someone who has lost 30 years of their life. I'm not even sure still what that is. But AI in that process, amidst a legal team of incredibly experienced, capable, thoughtful lawyers, it was thorough, efficient, immediate, and invaluable, right? So to me, it's not theory. Like it wasn't really even abstract until that point, but to actually see that result, and when the City Council of Chicago approved the settlement, you realize that okay, the money that and time that was otherwise traditionally expended by lawyers doing things, we can now use AI and deploy it. And from an access to justice point of view, it slotted in beautifully there. And we were just, everything about the case was stronger as a result. So it's no longer theory to me, right? It's no longer something that just feels like we should be using it. It's something that I'm going to sort of inject into my practice. And I think I have a great testimonial case study to sort of support that idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You've mentioned access to justice a few times, and I completely agree with that. I think going back, Jody and I are civil lawyers, and going back just a step on that, one thing that I can see that AI does is someone who knows how to use the tool can compete against a larger team of lawyers who don't know how to use the tool and be very effective. And so that's, again, something that folks just need to be mindful of, that it's a big time investment to learn about it. But if you're someone in my practice setting, I'm a solo these days, I almost feel like I can't afford not to learn it, because for one, if I don't learn it, I'm going to get passed by. But two, I think it really will allow me, and does allow me to, I guess, show a lot bigger than I really am. It's not really what I mean, but in terms of the power of it in my practice, and the horsepower that it adds overall can be tremendous when used properly. So I guess that's my pontification for the day, and I'll stop there.
Wait, I think you're right. I mean, then this could go down a conversation of like how it's going to affect billing in general. Like what's it going to do to the billable hour? We seem to have that conversation all the time. So I think you're right. I think that the threads and the effects of this are really going to run quite deep.
Well, Joe, it's been great to have you. We certainly appreciate your time and loved hearing about your perspective, and just think a lot of what you're doing in the public defender's office there, and teaching our future lawyers. So thanks for being with us.
It was a pleasure, y'all. Thank you so much. And yeah, it was a real joy.